I'm Bill Crum for newsok.com and the Oklahoman. With me today is Pete White. He's the Ward 4 councilman, represents Southeast Oklahoma City, and has for a good long time on the city council. We are going to talk about preemption, which is the word that's used when the legislature assumes authority for things that have traditionally been within the purview of cities. And of course, Councilman White's on the city council when the legislature preempts municipal authority for things like taxi services or oil drilling regulations, so on and so forth. It is of concern to members of the city council. So welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
When you think about preemption, what comes to mind?
Well, I guess a few years ago, if you'd have used that word, I would have just thought about it as the normal definition of the word, which means to prevent somebody from doing something before they actually have the chance to do it. What comes to mind now is the Oklahoma legislature. I mean, they seem to be just, and not just the legislature, all of the government. The governor's office is as guilty as is the legislature of preempting our ability to run cities the way we've done them for years.
And what are some examples that come to your mind? I mentioned the preemption of oil drilling regulations within city limits, taxi regulations with regard to Uber and Lyft. What are those some of the things, and there's others that
those
come to your
are two
mind?
very, very good ones. I mean, for the Uber Lyft thing, to me, Uber Lyft may have a good idea. That remains, the market remains to tell us that. But we've regulated taxi service for years. We have all these laws in place that regulate cabs. It seems to me what they did is just created another field, not a level field, but another totally unregulated field.
And Oklahoma City spent better part of a year, maybe even a little bit longer, developing regulations specifically for that model,
right?
To protect public safety and welfare.
Things like insurance, making sure they had insurance.
Right.
Things like that.
And then the legislature did what?
They just said we can't regulate them. They're the one that's going to regulate them.
And they passed it along to the Corporation Commission.
Right.
To do that.
They did the same thing with oil and gas. We've regulated oil and gas within the city limits of this city since the 30s, when the discovery field was made in the late 20s. As that oil field moved north, it moved into the Lincoln Terrace edition, where beautiful homes were built. They were already built. It moved all through southeast Oklahoma City. And we regulated that and reached an accord with the oil companies, and it worked just fine. Somebody down in Texas decides to ban drilling within their city limits, and they immediately decide that we shouldn't be able to regulate oil and gas. We've got lots of drilling inside the city limits of Oklahoma City, right. And they just preempt our ability to do that. We wanted to regulate smoking. Oklahoma City is a huge employer and has a very good health insurance plan. One of the things we discovered is that one of the big causes of expenses in that plan is that people smoke. We decided we wanted to regulate smoking, and they preempted that to a certain extent. It was something the governor's office did just recently, is that with the cooperation of Oklahoma City, there was an effort made to give a bid preference for construction work to contractors that
right.
live within cities.
Mm-hmm.
Not only did, after the legislature passed it, then the governor vetoed it. And the governor vetoed it with language that I find, personally, I found them very difficult. She said it was to limit the possibility of cronyism and corruption. Well, there's no she couldn't point to an example in Oklahoma City where there's been corruption.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect that the state's had its share. If we did it based on the quantitative analysis of corruption and cronyism, I think the state's probably been far more guilty of that than the cities
Mm-hmm.
have. But now we can't do that. We thought that was a good thing to do,
Mm-hmm.
to support Oklahoma businesses.
Right.
Oklahoma City businesses in the business of providing services. couldn't, the way it was structured, it wouldn't have cost the taxpayers any money at all. But it was vetoed on the basis that it was to prevent cities from engaging in cronyism and corruption, and I find that a little bit offensive.
Of which there were no examples.
No examples.
And we had a recent example of an oil company that wanted to drill out at Lake Hefner, and there was public outcry about that. There was a public meeting and so on and so forth. And they withdrew that application, but that was voluntary, and it seemed to be based on the reaction of the citizenry.
Right.
Here. And as you said, there's another, 1,200 oil wells or something like that within the city limits.
Yeah. The airport trust, for example, owns the minerals under the airport and gets a tremendous amount of money from that. The Riverfront Redevelopment Authority that has developed the river owns the minerals in the lake bed of the water bed of the river. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of money produced out of that. Mm-hmm. It's been we permitted drilling sites. We shared those benefits by that. But the Lake Hefner site I think it was okay, frankly. I wouldn't have ever put it forward from the water trust if I hadn't been satisfied. But I can certainly understand the public's concern about contamination of water and so forth. It was fairly close to the lake. Mm-hmm. And probably it's the best thing that we didn't drill the well. But that's another thing. We've tried to do something about vacant and abandoned buildings, and we developed a registry of that. And when the realtors in Oklahoma couldn't get us to do it exactly the way they wanted to, they went to the legislature, and the legislature did it the way the realtors wanted it. And now we've had to come back around and start a whole new system.
Mm-hmm. And we should say, speaking about the oil drilling at Lake Hefner, you're the chairman and have been for how long of the Water Utilities Trust?
Well, I was originally chairman in 1986. I've been on the council 17 years, and most of that time I've been the chairman.
So you know a lot about the Water Trust and getting clean water to the citizens of Oklahoma City. Blight, as you mentioned, big problem in Oklahoma City. There was a study done that showed or counted at least 12,000 vacant and abandoned buildings in the city, and the city. I think unanimously, I think the city council approved the registry as an opportunity to begin to address blight and the impact that buildings that are not being maintained, homes that are not being maintained, have on neighborhood values and so on and so forth.
Well, yeah, I could go on and on. A particular legislature was concerned a few years ago about the restrictions that we put on, or our failure to put restrictions on a dog kennel. He got a bill passed that we had to go, and for 2 years now, we have been fighting with the legislature to let us allow a dog grooming facility in downtown Oklahoma City because they couldn't find a place to put one that wasn't close to a church or whatever the restrictions were. I mean, totally.
Just for a place where you could take your dog to have it shampooed and clipped.
Right. I mean, there is just a total disregard for what we do in running cities compared to what they do in running the state. I could go on into that. I mean, we could start with this year's budget. I mean, I can't help but take some of that personally, having been on the council for a long time. But we do a good job of running this city. And we budget in the open. We pass laws in the open. Our hearings are always public. They're always well attended by people in the public.
And members of the public speak.
Right.
They have the opportunity to.
You would hope that people in the legislature would try to make our job easier and better for the citizens of Oklahoma City rather than the special interests that seem to control their votes with regard to preemption.
Mm-hmm. And you're getting to a question I was thinking about, which is why does the legislature approach municipal government and treat cities the way they do? And in fairness, they've done some things for Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City is, I think, the largest sales tax remitter to the state, and the legislature passed a law to reduce the fee that the Oklahoma Tax Commission charges cities all over the state. Oklahoma City is not the only one that will benefit, but Oklahoma City is looking at something like another $2.1 million in the general fund budget next year, because that fee was reduced from 1% to 0.5% starting July 1st.
Right.
But why? What's your assessment or analysis of why the legislature approaches cities and treats municipal government the way they do?
You know, I don't have a good answer. I don't understand why they would do that. I don't, it's just beyond me. You could call it a rural-dominated legislature maybe and say they have some axe to grind with the municipalities, but, you know, we have legislatures that were elected within the boundaries of the city of Oklahoma City that don't vote the way. I wish I had an answer.
The legislature generally has concerns about Congress, and state government generally has concerns about Congress. Clean air regulations, I think clean water regulations recently, so on and so forth. Do you see a disconnect between the way the legislature and state government leaders express their concerns about federal control of federal government versus the way they treat municipalities and local government?
It's almost like the legislature believes that local government is them, that anything below them is not local government. I mean, they complain all the time about, as you point out, all the different regulations that the feds put on them, and yet they turn around and do the very same thing. And we're not the only entity of a governmental institution that is. They do the same thing. The school boards. I mean, they pass laws that testing requirements and charter school requirements. We elect people to help us with public education. They run for office and they serve, and that's what they do. And yet the legislature, in their wisdom, believes that they need to tell them how to operate. It is a disconnect. That's a good word for it, because I don't think they at all believe. They certainly don't believe that we are local government. They think they're local government. It just doesn't make sense.
The city collects your trash. It brings clean water to your tap.
We are much closer to the public than the state is. Much closer. I don't understand it. We do the policing, we do the fire, we do the streets, we do everything, and yet they seem to want to control that.
Mm-hmm. Does it sometimes feel like maybe you're handcuffed?
A little bit.
In regard to providing the services that citizens expect, and yet you persevere?
I love being a councilman. I've been a councilman a long, long time. I love it. You know, I like the interaction between the citizens and the government. It's kind of right down there where the rubber meets the road. You and I were in the car a moment ago, and I got a call from a constituent about a zoning case. I like being involved at that level with people. So it'll pass. I mean, somehow or other, I think the public will awaken to what the legislature, some of the misguided things they do. It's not to say that everybody out there is misguided and every law they pass is a bad one, but I think if you look at Oklahoma City and then compare the way we do it to the way they do it, I think you'd like the way we do it a whole lot better. Mm-hmm. Our budgeting process started in February. It was open, meeting after meeting after meeting, most of them televised, citizen attendance, televised interviews between the council and the department heads about why your budget's this way, and are you adding police officers, and why can't you add more, and all those things are done right on television, and it will be approved next Tuesday.
Actually, it was approved this Tuesday.
Well, the final deal will be, we'll see it again one more time.
Oh, is that right?
But,
okay.
But
My mistake.
it's all done out in the open. I mean, they didn't even give their membership one night to look at it.
To look at the budget?
To look at the budget itself. I talked to the legislator this morning. He said he didn't have any idea what they were doing. He didn't know. He tried to find out, and he couldn't find out how this was going to go about specific things. Mm-hmm. And not to have open public meetings about something as important as a budget, especially one that had a $611 million hole in it, to me, and they're going to talk about the way we do business. They're worried about cronyism and corruption at our level. I think there's just a disconnect there somewhere.
All right. Well, thanks very much. Councilman Pete White, the councilman from Ward 4 in Southeast Oklahoma City, longtime councilman and chairman of the Water Utilities Trust. I'm Bill Crum for News OK and the Oklahoman. Thanks for being with us.